Everybody. Today's our August breakfast meeting. Today we have our presenters, Derek, Lucas, and Trina. I'll give a quick little introduction. They're going to be talking about the PMO evolution in an enterprise agile safe environment. Just a little background there. Derek is the EPMO Director of Priority Health, Spectrum Health's insurance entity. He has provided program and people leadership for the respective EPMO departments and numerous large-scale change initiatives, including the integration of new hospitals and practices into systems, as well as multi-year replacement for systems core EMR systems. And then we have Trina. She's a leadership consultant, adjunct facilitator, speaker, strategic portfolio manager, and experienced lean practitioner. And we have Lucas, who's a portfolio manager who uses lean agile practices and a bias for action to guide teams on journeys of transformation. So I'll go ahead and Kinga, if you could share so that Trina can have control here. Morning, everybody. Let's see everyone. Wide awake. Trina, if you have any problems taking over there. And before she starts there, just want to let you know if you could, if you want to put your questions in the chat here, I'll be bringing that to the team's or the group's attention here. We're going to try to save our questions to the very end, make sure we have time for that. So if you could put them in there, I'll kind of save them towards the end. And I also will unmute you at the end of you when I ask those questions, just to let you know ahead of time there. We'll kind of save it towards the end. So go ahead, Trina.
Yeah.
And actually, Derek is our first speaker, so I will defer to Derek.
Yeah, I'm glad to lead it off. So good morning, everyone. I want to just say Friday morning meetings are always a challenge, but this is refreshing because I've been looking at a Microsoft Teams screen for the last 5 months, and I'm looking at a WebEx. We're changing it up. It's a good thing. Yeah, just some quick introductions. So thanks, Alex, for the intros for us. I've been at Spectrum Health for a while, so 17 years total. Extensive background in consulting coming in, and I just 17 years at one organization is a long time, but it's been exciting to be part of the journey of our PMO. As we started with an org in IS that was the size of you could fit it on one page of a Visio, and to where we're at now, a highly complex organization with over 1,000 folks in the IS department, including several PMOs as part of that. So excited to be here, share part of our journey at Priority Health with regard to Agile and in particular SAFE this morning. And I just want to thank you all for coming. And then Trina, do you want to do an intro?
Sure, thanks, Derek. I'm Trina Poston, one of the portfolio managers for the EPMO at Priority Health. I've only been with Priority Health for going on 2 years. Prior to that, spent a little time outside of the organization, in addition to about 12 years at Spectrum Health previously. My portfolios include our digital member experience, which I'm particularly passionate about, our provider experience, commercial products, and government programs. So really kind of runs the gamut of a little bit of everything that we do at Priority Health. I've been involved with West Michigan PMI for many, many years, so I'm excited to be here in this capacity as a presenter today. And Lucas?
Good morning, I'm Lucas. I've been at Spectrum Health and Priority Health for a total of about 5 years now. I'm also a portfolio manager on Derek's team. My areas of focus are largely operations, our data teams, and our infrastructure area of the business as well. It's great to be here. Good morning.
Excellent. So just to walk us through a high-level agenda for this morning, I want to start with just an overview of our journey, where we started and how we wound up to the point where we are at today with SAFE. So I'll give you an overview of that. I want to cover too our SAFE implementation at Priority Health. We're still on that journey. We're still learning. I think part of the conversation today will be those learnings and sharing those with the group. And I also see, as I look out on the attendees here, you've got folks from our team even who are joining. So hopefully, if we have time, it's not just about the perspective of leadership from our org. I'd love it if some of our team members would be willing to share some of their experiences too. Want to talk a little bit too about future vision and next steps. As I said, we're on that journey, we're on the path, and we're heading to other great things like lean portfolio management on the horizon. And so I'll share some plans around that, and then hopefully a good amount of time reserved for a discussion at the end. So if that sounds good, we'll move to the next slide. All right, I promise this is one of the wordier slides. We've got some really cool visuals. Word for word. As I said before, I've been at Spectrum for 17 years, but I've only been at Priority Health for about 3. And so when I came over to PH, they were in the middle of this transition. And as I talked to senior leaders, within our IS department, as they started to reorganize their teams, they were dealing with some real challenges at that time. The organization was growing tremendously just year over year. You think of Spectrum Health, and they've got a big presence in West Michigan. What you sometimes don't remember is Priority Health is just as large from a revenue standpoint. It pretty much equals or even exceeds Spectrum Health on an annual basis. Getting toward 1 million members now too, going over 1 million even this year. So very large business. We have 27, I think, project managers within our PMO just at Priority Health. And so the amount of coordination and synchronization required of those project managers, of those teams, was getting to the point where we were starting to experience some pretty big disconnects. And so customer satisfaction was going down. We weren't seeing necessarily all the benefits that we hoped to realize on our projects. And so some of those observed results of the assessment you can see down there, but we were burning our teams out. We had to find a different way of going about doing our work, and we had to find a way about working a little bit smarter. And that's where this idea or concepts of enterprise agile teams kind of came in. Go to the next one. All right, so this was our first opportunity, and this was around, I think it was early 2018 when the plan had been finalized. But the idea here was, if you looked at our IS department and the way we're organized, we have, I think, a little over 120 people that are focused just on project work, and a segment of that is our project managers. And so what we decided to do is reorganize more around Scrum Agile concepts and the concept of dedicated teams really to support key areas of the business. And so what that meant was kind of realigning a PM, business analyst, QA, development analyst, and making them part of a core team, long-standing team that serves the purpose of supporting various areas of the business at PH. And so what that is intended to do over time, kind of the way I would verbalize it, you create more of that trusted advisor relationship, opportunity really for especially our project managers to get to know the business better, get to know and work with leaders a little bit more, really understand and be able to provide more of those advisory services that we should be in an organization the size that we are. And so what you'll see at the chevrons below, 2017 really focused more on your traditional waterfall approach. In 2018, focused more around rearranging into these, we call them fixed teams, really agile teams, but focused more on that agile Scrum mindset. And so that's where we started with the traditional agile ceremonies that you would typically see, daily stand-ups, backlog reviews, and then also transition to tools as well. So leveraging Jira more today than we are Microsoft or CA Clarity as an example. So 2018 was really moving to that fixed team environment. 2019 is where we really started our journey down the road with Scaled Agile, and we have some really, I think, some helpful visuals that will tell that story when we get to those slides. And now that we're at that point with SAFE, where we've actually realigned our teams around what we call release trains, we're starting to look at some of those next opportunities to help support our business leaders better, and that's partnering in things like lean portfolio management and value stream identification down the road. So a lot of ground that we've covered to date, a lot of ground yet to come, and I think through this presentation, hopefully you'll get a good idea of our journey and what we have planned next.
So I think this is my slide, right, Derek?
You got it.
Cool. So I think a couple slides here on why did we land on Scaled Agile. There's a lot of different Agile frameworks, and there's actually more than one scaling approach to Agile as well. Scaled Agile, or SAFE, is what we've landed on at Priority Health. And these are a few of the things that helped us get there, helped us make that decision. On the left, you see what we observed, or at least a few things on what we observed from our business. So they really want us to do what we say we're going to do. They really value that reliability, and we need a framework that lets our teams commit to realistic goals on a fairly small scale. So on maybe a sprint scale, for example. Very closely related to that, business leaders hate surprises. So, when a project is green until it's red is kind of the behavior we really need to avoid in our EPMO. And then lastly, it was pretty clear to us from the IT side that business priorities were changing. Every 3 months or so, you could highlight a new set of top priorities, even from the CEO in some cases. So whether or not they would admit it, this plainly, we saw pretty clearly that we needed a framework that could adapt to changing priorities as our business environment changed rapidly as well. On the right-hand side, some realities that we saw as well, just for our own internal teams. Estimates are hard. I mean, when you look at a waterfall approach and the need to estimate a big body of work up front, that's really difficult, and we were missing the mark in some cases there. And then our teams need wins. Like in a more traditional waterfall world, we were struggling to celebrate teams, and people were feeling, I think, ground down and burnt out. And the ability for a team to complete a small set of work and celebrate that commitment was missing. And then lastly, this ambiguity piece. So it's related to changing priorities, but it's when teams are committing to 6 months worth of work, a large portion of that body of work is going to be a bit ambiguous and a bit unknown. And so that really slows them down and adds a lot of hidden risk to the project. So there's a few things that drove us towards Skilled Agile. There's lots of other ways to think about what's good about Agile, but these were some that we really honed in on. On the next slide, Trina, is another reason why we chose Skilled Agile specifically as that branded framework. We've got good company in West Michigan to help us along that journey, to give us examples of how that can work in a large enterprise setting. And then it's a globally, certainly nationally, but also globally accepted framework. And it's something where if we do need outside help from consulting, it's pretty easy to find, actually. So for these reasons, we've been really going down that safe journey as an organization.
Thanks, Lucas. So when I look at these organizations, one of the things that I think about is, regardless of size of the organization or where they are, or even what industry they're in, most of these organizations are really trying to do two things. One is improve their strategy execution, and two is improve their employee satisfaction and engagement. And this transition to Scaled Agile helps us, all of us, with that as well. And that's one of the more, I think, overlooked pieces of making this type of transition. So as we talk about how this all evolved, as I don't have to share with any of you coming from a traditional waterfall project management world, typically we find a group of people, we believe we're finding the best and brightest and best subject matter experts in a particular area. We bring them together, we talk about this project that we need to execute, we work really hard for an extended period of time, and then everyone disbands and goes back to their day job. These Agile teams are really the opposite of that. So to Derek's point about being trusted advisors, the real gift and the joy in the Agile team is having long-lived cross-functional folks coming together and staying together for quite a long time and being engaged in those business outcomes from soup to nuts. So those teams also have the ability to work together on what those commitments and goals are, determine the work that's really critically important, and how they want to go about it. The teams also spend time in that, for those that have more of a lean background, that PDCA cycle, spending time really evaluating what was our plan, how did we execute against it, what did we learn from this journey, and how do we make corrections in real time along the way. Another significant transition is the role of the product owner. Again, as I don't have to, preach to the choir on this one, typically we have someone who maybe a subject matter expert, or maybe someone that's just voluntold that they are going to be responsible for the project. And they do the best that they can, but maybe they're not deeply ingrained in the work or don't really have a commitment to it. So transitioning to a product owner and having someone that's really engaged in a day-to-day, working with the team and helping everyone meet their goals is really one of the things that keeps these teams engaged, keeps the decision-making a living, breathing thing and not just something that's documented on a piece of paper and that goes away throughout the life of the project. And then, of course, Scrum Masters. So this is where our teams have made the transition from that traditional project manager role to a Scrum Master. I won't say that it's been easy for everyone, right? Most of us have spent quite a bit of time in our professional lives really learning that discipline of project manager. We're really great at doing the documentation, keeping the teams on track. Scrum Master taps into a little bit different skill set. And so being kind of that day-to-day ringleader, ringmaster that's keeping the teams on track and moving forward. And then when we expand that out a level, at an Agile program level, we've got teams of teams that come together that work on large-scale initiatives for the organization. Same process, you're still doing plan, do, check, act, but just expanding that out even further, including your business owners who are really focused on setting that vision, setting that strategic focus, and making sure that the team and the product managers are aligned to that. Product managers are integral to this journey. They're really more of that product owner for the train, so this broader group of people that are working together. What I love about this is very often project management in a traditional sense can feel very transactional. We came together, we did a thing, it's done. We all drink the beer, eat the pizza, and then we all go back and do something else. In this sense, the team, the product owner, product manager, business owner are all right there with the team. They're all making decisions together. There's that, tribal knowledge that stays within the team because they've been part of this program and part of this journey for quite some time. And then kind of the last piece of that secret sauce is the RTE. So they act as the Scrum Master for the train. They're the person that truly is that conductor or train engineer that's making sure all the parts and pieces get put together, that features are identified, that any type of dependencies are identified and worked through. And they also coach and mentor the Scrum Masters as well. So really just more continuity of what the team is able to not only produce, but how they build and then engagement as they execute the work. So I love the little animation here. Just as a reminder, at this level, at an Agile program level, they're also focused at kind of that quarterly or about 10 to 12 week view of what's going on within the organization and those work commitments.
Thanks, Trina. So as we aligned our teams into that type of framework, that type of model, this is just one example of one of our areas where I see, and I think our organization as well would agree, that we saw some pretty dramatic change in mindset as we moved from more of that project world into more of that product management approach. So on the left are real projects, and this is from our data space. So this is painful for me because many of these were projects that I was accountable for. But if I really applied brutal honesty to how some of these went, comparing, that beginning, maybe the even like plan to execute phase gate for some of these projects versus where they really ended up, and really called out for myself, how did these actually go? And in many cases, projects don't go according to plan, and in some examples, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's natural evolution of a project, and things do change over time. But in some cases, the team was really being penalized, and I think the department as well was really being penalized and feeling maybe handcuffed in some ways to delivering work or to explaining changes that we felt were either not needed or maybe not necessary. So if we're able to transition away from that to more of a mindset where we know things are going to change over time, we know we're going to align a certain amount of resource to this data domain, for example, we can eliminate a lot of those types of conversations about why did this scope change so much over 6 months, or why did we overinvest so much in this capability, or why were we so much over our initial budget. If we make those decisions more collaborative and say, as we start out down this path, it looks like we're going to need to invest more in this particular capability. Should we continue to do that? And we can say yes or no, and not have as much of the overhead associated to that project structure and the funding that's so tightly tied to scope in that project world. So as part of that as well, we, at least in the first year of our SAFE journey, we did see a reduction in the amount of capital that we spent as well. And I would argue that all of that capital was spent more effectively than in more of that project-based approach. Now, this won't be, I don't think this will be quite as big a win in every type of IT development you could imagine. But I think, especially for our data warehouse and our data teams, this was a pretty big game changer.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucas and Trina. I just, we get the learnings along the way, but I just want to acknowledge too, we wouldn't be at the point where we are without the folks that we have in our PMO. We've got solid leadership, and that goes to Trina and Lucas in terms of our people leaders. But shout out to the folks on the phone that are on our team. You are change agents, just like those others on the team not here this morning, and we would not have been successful without our team stepping up, recognizing the role and the opportunity that Scaled Agile plays for an evolving PMO. And so just kudos to our team in the way that they've dealt with change and leading change. But with that, nobody is perfect. There's some learnings along the way. We have other learnings, obviously, than this one slide, but we wanted to capitalize on a few that I think are relevant probably for folks that are already on this journey or are wondering what should I be planning for, maybe anticipating as I continue down the path. The good, so for us, especially with COVID, internal training, we invested upfront in that. SAFE, just like PMI, has a number of certifications that you can get, ranging from a SAFE certified Scrum Master, Product Owner, Product Manager, RTE. They also have one called SAFE Program Consultant. And so earlier on in our journey, we invested in that. Trina's an SPC for us. What that allows us to do is give the same training that Scaled Agile consultants would give for the most part internally. And so even with the COVID downturn, I'm sure there are folks out there, your companies are probably pulling back on spending. Ours did as well. They said no external training, for a period of time. We were still able to invest in our people, in the certifications, and important not just to train IS, right? It's those product owners and product managers that really need to connect to that role. And having the internal training has helped us to do that. So that was a good win. The other thing, the good, executive investment in our message, especially within IS. So we've got some really strong partners at the executive level that are pushing for and advocating SAFE. So it's coming from the ground up and it's coming from the top down. I'd say right now, it's kind of like now we're reaching those tentacles of the octopus out into some of those areas that aren't quite as aware of what SAFE is out in the business. But our CIO, Jason Joseph, has made it clear that SAFE is going to become the way that we operate within our IS department. This is not a flash in the pan thing. And I think with that, hearing that message from our executive team too, it's clear, to us as team members that there's that investment and commitment there within IS. And so I think you're seeing that groundswell in the amount of folks getting trained, getting up to speed on SAFE and really embracing it. Next one, I called this out a little at the start, but resilient EPMO. Strong team, flexibility to undertake and lead significant change. That goes without saying. And I call this good friction and less noise for our teams. And I think, Lucas, you covered that well on the previous slide. We're focusing now on more productive conflict. There's less of a nitpicking around cost. As long as we're doing the right thing, our product owners and product managers help to provide guidance on what the priorities should be. Then there's less of that noise around, well, what about these 10 other things? Well, there's a backlog, we groom those features, we assign a business value, and then we go from there. And so it's made a little bit of that less confusing for our team, which has been helpful. Not quite as good, but getting there. So some learnings for us. Brilliant at the basics. Pure safe to start, tweak the model once everyone is operationalized. So there's a tendency, and it's probably within some of your organizations as well. You know, we're a special snowflake. I like this, but I'm going to tweak it this way right out of the gate. And we realized that as we were moving forward with SAFE and starting to launch additional trains, we were starting down that path of making too many changes, you know, distinctly within a train, and it was starting to trip us up a little bit. And so kind of that back to the basics was one thing that we messaged, I think it was earlier this year, pure safe, focus on that. We'll tweak the model once we kind of get to that best practice, but just start with the general model and then build it out from there. You know, if you can avoid customizing from the start, it'll be helpful to your cause. I mentioned a resilient EPMO, but we could have done a better job at change management, especially at the beginning of our journey. When we started with fixed teams, SAFE wasn't really even on the radar. And so we had a period of time when I started, probably for half a year or more, where I think there was a little role confusion there. Hey, I'm on this team now. I'm a project manager, but I'm working in Agile Scrum, and what does it mean? I think some of it for us was coming to grips with what working in a PMO in an Agile environment meant, and we were experiencing that together. But I think as leaders, any leaders on the call, just be aware of that why, and just trying to continue to relay that to the team so that they have a focus on what True North is and where they're heading. And I think we're there now, but it did take us a while to get there, and I think we could have been more effective at change management. With that too, so spending some time upfront on future roles definitions. So this isn't just within your PMO. You know, we are still figuring out our roles that will play as we move into LPM, but we're on that journey now. But there was some toe stepping, you know, especially within our IS department, IS leaders, kind of figuring out where my lane is now. Where do I operate? How do I support these, you know, self-governing teams, and how do I evolve in my leadership role? And some of that continues today, but I think there's always an opportunity for better communication on that front, and just spending a little bit extra time on the front end around roles definition and revisiting that on a regular basis. Last, our Lean Agile Center of Excellence. So it's called the LACE, really our center of expertise across the organization around our safe transformation. We struggled a little bit around how to turn LACE into an enabler at Priority Health, how to support us. They have, you know, the groundswell of expertise, you know, for training and things like that. We had some disconnects at the beginning around how to best engage them, but now that we've gotten a more firm partnership together, kind of understand the lay of the land, we're leveraging SAFE or the LACE a little more effectively than we have in the past, which is a good thing. All right, next slide. All right, so just quick visual, like what's next for us. So we're still on that journey. We started with essential SAFE, and now we're moving to more the portfolio safe, but we've got, you know, we have to support the existing infrastructure too. So right now, Trina, off the top of your, how many trains do we have in total at PH? Is it 5 or 6? I think.
I believe we have 6 total.
6 total trains. So if you look across our IS department, you know, for the most part, we are aligned with that safe model of operation, and so a large amount of our time is spent just supporting our existing trains, continuing to invest in them as we look forward, you know, on our roadmap of those next improvements that we want to make. Our Lean Agile Center of Excellence, so they are spread across a very large IS organization, so just making sure that we're scaling them appropriately. We're now posting for positions that actually report into the LACE, and so that's exciting, really making that investment that we need down the road to be successful. Guiding new trains and launching is needed, and that's where Lucas and Trina play a key role. They're collaborators and advisors with our IS leaders. They also help to guide the PMs and the Scrum Masters as we start to organize our trains and launch them. Plans for new trains. So we're mostly, I think from a train standpoint, there will probably be some train realignment needed down the road, but with 6 trains going and the way that SAFE has penetrated PH so far, really pleased with the progress that we've made. And then we'll cover this in another slide too. Roadmap for transformation. We're not done yet. Really, for us to get to that next inflection point with SAFE, we need to start moving towards something called lean portfolio management, and that really changes the way not only how our IS organization operates, how our teams operate, but also the tentacles into the business become even stronger at that point. So building that business partnership for us over the coming weeks and months is going to be key. And then longer term strategy for SAFE within Spectrum Health. So LPM is one thing, but as I mentioned before, SAFE is well known within IS, less so in some areas of our business, and that would go especially, I think, on our Spectrum Health West Michigan or delivery system side. And so if we want to advocate as SAFE as the way that we're going to do things within IS, we have to make sure that we're creating that willing coalition, and that goes across our entire org in those different business areas. All right. This is just a bird's eye view, and when I said our journey isn't complete yet, this is why Lucas and I, after we got out of all of our PTO in the summer, started blocking time, because we need to continue to build out our plan and blocking and tackling approach. And what you'll see on some of these categories, like gain executive buy-in, training teams, we're really building that foundation of support for LPM over the coming months. And then we get into the specifics of what does that mean to actually operationalize. And our plan at PH right now is to partner with one of our areas or value streams into the fall months in a pilot capacity, and really start to stand up, one, the value proposition, but two, the infrastructure that's going to be required if we want to get to all those exciting things in the execute and govern categories like participatory budgeting next year. Good to know, though, in the meantime, we're not letting that hold us up. We have what's called a community of practice now. Our PMs moving into that Scrum Master role meet regularly, kind of that center of excellence type concept. And then we also have an RTE, Release Train Engineer community of practice, that meets regularly. And so what's that help? What is that helping with? It's helping with an approach, best practice sharing, and it's creating a community of practice, among peers to share ideas and how we can move forward together. Trina, Lucas, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to layer on top of this, feel free.
One of the things you mentioned, Derek, and just as an aside for anyone who's listening, the training component of it, we had this little mantra as part of our LACE: train everyone, certify some. So I don't want you to think that it's overwhelming and that you have to have a lot of certifications in your organization, but certify those few key folks that can help you get to something like this visual. Certify those folks that really are going to spend the time helping you land on your roadmap and understanding the components of SAFE or whatever methodology you choose, that can really be those people that are out in front cheerleading and also helping make those smaller transitions along the way to help bridge the gap and make it easier for everyone.
And one thing I'll add to, Derek touched on the centers of excellence that we have. I think it's really important to not try to bottleneck continuous improvement in a Scaled Agile setting. So one of the most exciting things I see from those groups is when they identify areas that they need to improve on themselves, and then they figure out how to do it. And so it's not always Derek, Trina, or I identifying those opportunities and driving improvement. It's happening from individual contributors, release train engineers, those informal leaders or servant leaders, really taking the next steps in a lot of cases. That's really encouraging to me.
Good. We've got one more. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that takes us to the end of our presentation. I don't know, Alex, if there were any questions listed. Otherwise, we should open it up for a little Q&A if someone has. And also, if you're also on that journey with SAFE or another Agile type approach, love to hear about your experiences as well.
Yeah, I did not see any questions in the chat. As questions here. Oh.
Alex, so there was one question. The question was, what are some ways that you celebrate wins with a remote team?
Good question.
So how do you celebrate wins when you are working remotely?
So I'll give an example of that. And I think the teams do this too. The teams have been reserving some time just to have a time period, a chat where they can just kind of hang out. We have a lot of virtual happy hours at Priority Health. I think Trina in particular, I think you reserve some time every now and then to get your team together. And I've started to do those too as we moved into that model of being remote, where it's like, you miss those times where you're rubbing elbows in the office, not seeing each other, and you have to be really purposeful now about not losing those connections, or at least trying to keep them somewhat as strong as they were when they were in the office. But yeah, we do that. It's been a challenge, but we try to fit it in as we can.
Thank you, Derek. There is one more question. Can you please address HR perspectives? Are POs resource managers and responsible for performance reviews? Who provide performance reviews for Scrum Masters? Do you still conduct annual reviews, or are they adaptive dynamic on a monthly or quarterly basis? How do you promote open, safe conversations with regards to performance reviews?
Okay. Yeah, good question. So from a reporting standpoint, Scrum Masters, PMs that are within our PMO still report. They report up to Trina, Lucas, or myself. So there's been no change in reporting. They do not report to the product owner or the product manager. And I think it's pretty important too, kind of a conflict of interest too, to have them report. I would have some concerns about that if they reported up through the business. So that independence is important. We still at Spectrum we have a annual kind of cycle for performance reviews. And Trina, maybe you and Lucas can cover just how you do your coaching and mentoring. Call it iteratively, based on how things are going with your team at a given point.
Sure. As an organization, our annual performance cycle has changed a little bit with COVID. So we have that to contend with. It's a little less formal this year. But also, I would say in a transition to SAFe, you have more opportunity to observe your team members. So I see my folks in ceremonies. I see them, doing stand-ups. I see them in backlog refinement. So with this transition, there's definitely more opportunity to observe them doing the work. Typically, when we're doing performance reviews, a lot of that is, that 360 style where we go out and query different folks on how they interact with our folks. But in this model, I get to see it. I see it daily, weekly, monthly. I see it in PI planning. So from that perspective, it's actually a lot easier to do a performance review. And aside from that piece, it's far easier to do real-time coaching and mentoring with our teams. You can observe someone in a ceremony, and then, typically you would have that water cooler chat or that walk from meeting to meeting where you could provide real-time coaching. In a remote world, we're doing a lot of IMs, and it's great that people will just reach out and in many cases ask how they're doing in a certain area. But I think this certainly opens us up to more of that real-time coaching and mentoring versus the formal evaluation on an annual basis.
I would also add that I have a lot more fun in performance conversations in the Scaled Agile world than I did in a project world. I often shied away from evaluating a person's individual performance based on the status of their projects, right? The status color. There's a lot that's outside of a project manager's control, I think. And so those conversations can be difficult, but in an agile world, I focus on how is that team doing? Are you being a servant leader for them? Are you leading them on a journey of continuous improvement? Are they becoming more and more self-sufficient with every sprint? Those are all signs that you're being an effective Scrum Master and playing your role well. So it makes it easier, honestly, from a leader perspective.
Yeah, and while you guys were talking there, I think this is for the celebrations there, but a message says a direct message from your product management and product owners goes a long way, and inviting your CEO to your team meetings are a good way to recognize your team for their hard work. I think that's for the celebration piece, or just inviting those individuals will contribute to that. And then I did have another question that came in here as well, talking about getting that executive buy-in. And that transition, you guys talked about that a little bit there. The pain points or the cost that's involved there, they're just trying to get an idea of what they can expect to tell leadership. This is going to take 6 months to a year to really start to see the value from that cost or that change and that shift. It looks like they said they're on a start of an agile journey. but then looking at SAFe, what kind of expectations or tips that you could kind of give them, just if someone in that transition there that you've learned? I don't know, of three of you, which do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll start it off, and then Trina, Lucas, feel free to add your perspective too. I think we live in a really very data-driven organization, and so there's less of the qualitative, follow us along. This feels right. We should do it. There's a little bit of that, but there's also, well, show me it's working. And so for us, it's been coming up with quantifiable metrics and measures. At the start of our journey, we started looking at what metrics are we going to have over time that tell our story with the success of SAFe. How can our business partners look at this new model and say, hey, this not only feels better than what we were doing previously in terms of collaboration, but we're getting better results than we have in the past. And so we have a number of metrics that we track across our trains, and we report on those with regularity. I think every 2 weeks, we put Microsoft Sways out on our intranet pages to all of our sponsors so that they can see our evolution over time. And sometimes it's not perfect. Sometimes metrics go down, reliability, et cetera, but then that becomes an inflection point to have a broader discussion around how can leadership support us, as opposed to, oh, this is wrong and we need to take some punitive measures as a result. And so kind of keeping it on that positive side of collaboration as opposed to something that's more negative has been helpful with metrics too. Trina, Lucas, you want to pepper anything in on that?
Yeah, I think metrics are something that you have to kind of work your way into. If you have a leader that's coming in asking, well, how will I know that this is working, or how long should this take? This doesn't end. It's never over. This is part of a true transformation. So there is no, by December 31, 2020, we'll be done with SAFe and, we'll be at this place of nirvana. It just doesn't work that way. So for those early conversations, I focus on, how fast we go and how well we're able to perform depends on you and your engagement. We'll get to metrics, and really measuring those metrics behind the scenes for that first couple PIs is great, and then start to expose them a little bit later. Often we get really caught up in, did the numbers move? Are we green or red? And especially early on, one of our consultants uses the term watermelon metrics. Very early on, we're looking at things and calling them green. But if you peel back a little bit, you're finding that the metric itself is actually red, but we've found a way to tweak it and make it green just so that it's more appealing to people. So following those things really early on honestly doesn't benefit you as much as getting some time under your belt and then starting to look at what really needs to improve and measuring it then.
Definitely gonna have to steal that watermelon metrics term. Genius. All right.
I do have one question that I can see. Do you see the role of project changing, or just the project characteristics of how they are executed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the role definitely changes to the point where we formalized a Scrum Master job family. So not only are there project manager positions at Spectrum now, we formally recognize Scrum Master positions, and they're pretty much, they are on parity. So if we have a senior PM is operating more in a senior Scrum Master role. We've been working on that transition process over the past several months to formally recognize the contributions. I think one of our challenge with the dynamics is being able to shed all the vestiges of what it was to be a project manager. And I think that's the next pain point, especially I feel with those who report to me that I need to address. Because for our RTs, as an example, to be the program managers, if you will, for a train, they can't be doing the traditional day-to-day project management stuff that they did in the past. And so it's really recognizing that, creating an action plan to offload those accountabilities, and then helping them move forward as effective as they can be in their new role. So that's been a little bit of a pain point.
All right, let's see, I'm trying to look. Any other questions out there if anyone wants to unmute, or any comments that they have too, as well as I kind of look through here, see if I missed any.
Yeah, And if you're from our team, feel free if you want to chime in, provide your perspective. I'm sure folks would appreciate hearing it.
So, hi, good morning. I'm Adam Parmenter, work at Zoetis. I'm in an organization that is not part of Zoetis's IT group, but the product we produce is a data product. So we're kind of this rogue IT, and some of our developers are dabbling. They're using sprint cycles, they're using Jira, but we really don't have a cohesive agile framework. So I sort of an agile chaos in a way. So if you were looking at an organization that really had yet to formalize agile, let alone safe, where would you point them to at the starting point? I mean, a small baby step.
I don't know if Trina can see I'm looking at her right now. The reason I look at Trina a lot is because this isn't her first rodeo at Priority. So do you want to take that one, Trina?
Sure. One of the first things I would say is one that's very normal. So level set the team with where we are is very normal. These types of growing pains and issues that we're experiencing are very, very common. And so, the first step is recognizing that there's a problem, right? So from there, next step I would say is start to evaluate frameworks and methodologies and figure out if there is something that resonates with your organization that speaks to those pain points that you're experiencing, and then start to leverage that. Don't feel like you have to go it alone. So often our organizations, we feel like we have to figure it out and create our own framework and figure out the path forward. And we don't. There's plenty of methodologies and frameworks out there to support us. Really, I think is a step one, evaluate that there's a problem and then start looking at those frameworks that support the organization and can meet you where you are. And that really can speak to some of the issues that you're facing and then go from there. And that could be finding consultant partners, that could be finding, leveraging a group like West Michigan PMI and reaching out to colleagues. But don't feel like you have to go it alone. Find a partner that can help you identify the issue and potentially a framework or methodology that can support what you have going on.
Thank you.
Any other questions there?
Yes, so there's one more kind of a follow-up question about the performance reviews. This one is specific to dev team members. Would you ever have a product owner write a performance review for dev team member? Or who does that performance review in your organization specifically for the dev team?
Yeah, so in our org, we have dev managers, and so those BAs, QAs, they report, or analysts, they report up to a dev manager within IS. So there's no reporting relationship, to the product owner or product manager. I think what you see is just like with Trina, Lucas, and I, is that constant triangulation for mentoring purposes, with our business leaders, including the POs and the PMs. But there's no direct reporting relationship.
Okay, thank you. So my question, what reporting tools do you guys use and your team is using? Is this Rally, is it Jira? How are you reporting? What is the tool? And how do you like it? Would you recommend it? Or is this a lot of pain points and you wish you have never implemented it?
I think we should let Lucas talk a little bit about Jira and maybe also.
He was smiling. He was smiling.
Sure, yeah. So he geeks out on that stuff, but yeah, take it, Lucas.
So all of our Agile teams are using Jira. There's not a fixed format that we dictate for the teams. Our Jira implementation is pretty wide open, pretty customizable. So each team maybe has a different flavor of their Kanban workflow within a sprint, but that is a common tool that all our teams use. One thing we're piloting, and I think we're moving beyond pilot now, is a product called Jira Align. And it's a product that Atlassian acquired. I think it used to be an independent company that built a product on top of Jira to better adapt it to Scaled Agile. but it was acquired by Atlassian, and so it's one of their in-house products now. I think our teams are still learning how to best use that tool. It definitely has all the terminology you'd expect from Scaled Agile perspective. It has what looks to be a really full feature set, and so the challenge there is learning how to use it, figuring out if it adds a lot of value. I think our release train engineers really like having access to it because it helps consolidate up reporting in a consistent way. But that tool is not fully deployed yet in our organization.
Just to add a little bit onto that, in terms of tools, one of the challenges of being remote and with Scaled Agile approaches, we do quarterly, now 10-week planning cycles for our trains. And so how do you coordinate a group of sometimes 60 as high as 90 people used to sit in a room for 2 days and work to iterate around what's going to be the priority for that quarter or that program increment? We leveraged or started leveraging a tool called Miro. It's a visualization tool, and what it's allowed us to do is we have what we call program increment days. We just had them earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday, and it allows us to have a real-time access for the entire team to the boards, the whiteboard type views, dependency diagrams, all those things that we would have in a physical presence. We're able to do that remotely, and so Miro has really helped to support us in the level of collaboration we need to have within a train to plan out what we need to do for the next program increment.
Derek, that's a really great call out because we've been in this virtual world so long, I almost didn't remember life before. We're talking about tools and systems that we could potentially use, but remember, if you're thinking about doing this in a physical space, this was as simple as paper and sticky notes on a wall. Mm-hmm. So if you're in an organization that maybe doesn't have all of the tools, I mean, you could still do squares in an Excel document to note visualize your stickies. You still could do it. Obviously, Miro and tools like that make it very easy, but that should not be a limiting factor if you're in an organization that does not have those tools.
Good point.
Yeah, and I just learned about the Miro board and during the Certified Discipline Agile, and yeah, I definitely love it. And we are bringing the Discipline Agile course in November, so everybody will be exposed what that Miro board will look like. So there will be a little session on how to operate Miro. So pretty cool.
Awesome.
So you mentioned, now virtual world, you used to meet over 2 days, 60, 90 people, a lot of, logistic burden, how to house them, and organize all of it. Since moving to online world, are you seeing having more meetings virtually after COVID per se?
Yeah, I think we all have different perspectives on that. One of the things that I talked about with the team when we started with COVID, we kind of launched into this mode where I got to go. And it was after that first month, people were exhausted. And we've had a few conversations since that time on what are my boundaries as a PM Scrum Master member of the team, working with my team and working with others. And then two, just recognizing, hey, we're all people. Like we've got school for many on my team. I'm one of them starting up next week. What does that mean when you have youngsters running around and you have to juggle your schedule? So the feedback from our organization has been, we're just as productive offsite as we were onsite, I think would be it in general. I think the challenge is making sure that our team members feel like they have the balance. And in cases where things are getting back, having those conversations to kind of get that balance back on track to where they think it needs to be. Trina, Lucas, you probably had some experiences around that too. I don't know if you want to share.
I think for like PI planning, for example, there is still benefit to being together, even if it's not going to increase your performance or the quality of your planning. It's just more fun to be face to face with people. So I do hope that day comes soon where we can do that. But even if we are in person, I think we might use some of these digital tools in place of some of the physical ones. And maybe that can be up to the team on a team by team basis. But a lot of our teams really like Miro, as people are commenting in the chat.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes it easier for collaboration and not having to have everyone in a room for an entire session. Mm-hmm. But for those larger planning cycles themselves, those are definitely nice to have face-to-face. I've had a couple folks on my team that actually started during COVID and are Scrum Masters on teams that they've never physically met. So for us, I think we do have more of that lean toward getting into a physical space just to make those connections and get to know people a little bit more personally.
All right, a few minutes left before we get cut off here. I do want to let everyone know we put that PDU code back in the chat for you to claim your PDUs. And just want to thank Derek, Lucas, and Trina. It's been a really cool presentation this morning. We've had a lot of positive feedback in the comments. A lot of eye-opening tools to look at and discussions to be had at their organizations. And so this is what it's all about. We really appreciate you guys coming this morning and talking about that.
You bet. Thanks for the invite. Glad to share what we've if you're on a similar journey.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a great morning.